Setting up a version queue workflow is both simple and straightforward. It can be set up by either somebody who runs a design studio or the IT department at a company. Now, version queue, which is a virtual server, can be installed on each individual machine. However, for optimal results, it's best to install version queue on a dedicated server, and that's what we're going to be talking about in this particular video. This server can either be Mac or Windows, regardless of the systems that are used by the designers, which really allows both design and IT departments to coexist peacefully. To install version queue on a dedicated server, you'd use the regular standard install disks for Adobe Creative Suite, and in the install screen, only choose to install version queue and uncheck all the other applications. The license agreement that comes with Adobe Creative Suite allows version queue to be installed on a dedicated server without requiring an activation process. Once version queue has been installed on the server, you come over to the Preferences panel for version queue CS4, which is what I have open right now. Before I go ahead and I start the server here, I'll just quickly go through some of the settings here. You want to make sure that your server is obviously visible to others rather than being private. And you can choose a workgroup size. Now, it's not important to get this right. This just allows version queue to optimize itself from a performance perspective to work best for the number of people who you have. So just choose the best one that fits. Don't worry about it if it's not that perfect. You also might want to bump up the memory usage as much as you can just to allow version queue to offer better performance. Once you have that done, just simply click on the Start button, and that will get the version queue server started. You'll notice over here that little color will kind of show up here on this icon. And because this is the first time launching version queue, it's going to direct me to the administration page, which is going to open up in a web browser. Here I'm going to log in. Right now, I don't have any users set up, so I'm just going to use the standard system one. So I'm just going to assign a password for this system or this administrator for the version queue server here. I'm going to go ahead and assign a password here. And I also want to assign myself a different server name. This is the name basically that your server is going to be known by, or think about if you have a mounted volume that is shared amongst many different designers. So you might want to call this design department, for example. So let's go ahead and call this design department. And you want to make sure again that the server visibility is visible to others. And then simply go ahead and choose Save and Continue. That's going to take us to the next part of basically setting up the server for version queue. Now that that's done, I'm going to log in by the same one that I had just set up before, the same user. And of course, once I'm in the system here, we'll actually go ahead and we'll set up some individual users so that we can come back and make sure that everything is personalized. So in that case, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to choose Manage Users and Groups. And let's go ahead and create some new users for the system. So right now, I already have one of these names in here, which is myself right here. But let's add a second name here. Maybe we're going to be adding a designer, for example. So I'm going to choose here New, and let's give a username for this. Let's call it JDesigner. And let's say that this login also, JDesigner. Let's give it a password. Verify that password. And as far as the admin access level, I can either specify that person is a user or a system administrator. Let's give the person just a user over here. And we'll allow that particular user to create projects. Projects are really the center of what a version queue server does. We'll actually set one of those up in a minute. Projects is a place where we're going to store all of our files. So you can assign a phone number and some email here and also some comments. It's important to actually put this information in here. For example, let's just put in over here a fictitious phone number here and also an email. So let's do jdesigner@company.com. And we can put some comments in. The reason why it's important to specify phone and email, as we'll soon see later on inside of version queue, when I'm doing PDF reviews, for example, all this information will automatically be there, so I can generate notifications to users, send reviews, to invite people to review on particular PDF documents automatically. So I'm going to click on the Save button. You'll see over here that I now have that person added here. I also have the ability to specify different groups of users, and I can specify a whole bunch of maybe designers as a design group, and that will later on allow me to very easily assign privileges to an entire group for particular projects. So now that we have a user set up, we have the ability here to create some groups. Let's go ahead and create a project. I'm going to click on the Projects tab here, and I already have one project here called Test Project, but let's create another project. Click on the New button here to create a new project. Let's create a blank project here. And let's give this project a name. Let's say we can call this one Annual Report. I want to be able to share this project with others. Now, of course, version queue would have the ability to have projects be private, meaning that only certain people have access to that particular project, but I want all my designers to have access to this. I'm also going to enable lock protection for this project, and that will allow me to prevent files from being overwritten or prevent collisions so that when I have two designers working on the same project, they don't accidentally overwrite each other's files. There'll be notifications, which we'll cover in a separate video, that will basically inform designers, hey, somebody else is working on that file. You have to wait until they save and check that file back in before you have the ability to make any changes to that file. I can also add some comments in here. And of course, this is helpful to allow other people on my design floor to know what this particular project is for. So say this is for the annual report. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the Create button. So what I can do now is I can also immediately assign permissions. What can people who have access to version queue here to this particular server do in this particular project? For example, I can click on JDesigner over here, and I could say, well, I'll allow him to read and to write, but I don't want him to be able to delete files. And then I could save those permissions. So that way I very easily can choose who can or cannot do certain things to all these different files. So we've set up users so far, and now we've also set up a project. Let's see how we can actually access version queue also directly through the Finder. So now that we're done with the administration, I'm simply going to log out, and I'll go ahead and I'll quit my Safari right now, and I can also quit the system preferences as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here and I'm going to open up something called Adobe Drive CS4. Now this is a separate application. I'm going to go ahead and bring this up onto my screen over here, which is going to allow me to basically mount a drive on my computer so that I can very easily just simply drag things or add things from any application or even from the Finder or the Explorer on Windows directly into my version queue workspace. Now, as I've said, Adobe Drive is an application. Another way to also connect directly to an Adobe Drive is to simply open up any file in your Finder and open up your contextual menu. Go to where it says More and then choose Adobe Drive CS4 Connect To, and that will launch Adobe Drive as well. So here I am over here. I'm going to click on this button over here that says Connect to Version Queue. Right now, you'll see that this server, which we set up before, called Design Department, is now available. I can click on that and then click on the Connect button. I'll type in my particular name over here. So let's type in a name here. Let's say we did JDesigner as before. Password. And I want to say Remember Me. And I could also choose to automatically connect when the computer starts, just so I don't have to go through this process continuously. I'll click on the Connect button, and that will go ahead now and create a mounted drive on my computer. As you can see over here, it shows up just like my regular hard drives here. Now I can simply take any particular file whatsoever, open up my annual report, which is the project that we created earlier before, and I can take any of my files and simply drag it right into that folder, and that adds it right into that particular version queue workspace, and that of course gives that access now to any other designer who would have access to that particular version queue workspace. So that's how Adobe Drive gives you access to your version queue server right from your desktop.